Once we have created our first view model, it is good to remember that we can create a binding between any source property to any property that is part of a control and is of type bindable property. Let's do some tests so you can see this in action. I'm going to stop the execution of the application. I'm going back to the mode called person, and I'm going to define a set of different additional properties, such as, for example, married, birth date, weight, and launch time, to do some testing with controls. We also need to update the initial information found in the view model, named person view model. I'm going to replace the creation of the list of people with this new instance that I have pasted, where we are simply assigning some additional values to the properties that we added previously. Once we have this information, we don't have to do anything else in the code behind, since we are binding directly to the view model. Let's start the application to test some bindings. With the application being executed, let's bind some properties to controls. For example, let's bind the age property to a slider control. Let's go back to the XML code. I'm going to define a slider control. I will assign a maximum value equal to 100, a minimum value equal to 0, and later I will assign the value through a binding to person.age. I close the label, and we can already see the control that is being displayed. Notice that the thumb appears in the center, since it has a value of 50. The minimum value is 0, and the maximum value is equal to 100. Let's test now the merit property. For it, we can use several controls. In our case, we will use a switch control. Let's indicate that the toggle property is going to be bind to the property married. Let's close the label, save the changes, and the control appears with the preset value that we assigned previously. Let's test now the birthday property. For it, we define a control that accepts dates, as for example, a date picker. We're going to indicate that the property called date is going to have a bind to the property person.birthdate. I save the changes, and already appears the control in which we can select a specific date. In addition, appears selected the date that is defined in the view model. Let's test now the property called weight. And for this, we can use an entry control. Let's assign to the text a bind with person.weight. Let's close the label once again, and we can already see the control entry that displays this value that we have pre-initialized. Finally, let's test the property called launch time, which contains a time span data type indicating a specific time. We're going to return to the XML file, and we will use a time picker control. We bind this time to the time property through a binding, the property called launch time. Let's close the label. We return to the application, and we can already see the control that allows us to select a schedule of the day. This is how we can manipulate properties of the controls. We could do other kind of things. For example, we could set whether a control is visible or not, if a control must be enabled, or other similar actions.